Welcome back to another episode of History in Your Own Backyard. I'm your host, Susie Selleck, here today in Aurora, Indiana, where I'm going to take you through a dozen or so historic sites that you probably haven't heard of, so stay tuned. I'll tell you all about it.
Hi, I'm Jenny Awad with the Dearborn County Historical Society, and I'm also the county historian for the state of Indiana.
And I'm Mark Brewery, serving the people of Aurora as their mayor.
The first settlers came to our shores in 1790, and that's 232 years ago. Samuel Morrison was born here in 1798, and he was considered the first Caucasian child born in this area. Jesse Holman arrived in 1811, appointed by William Henry Harrison, and he laid out the town of Aurora in 1819.
So come and write your page of our history. Our downtown is very what I call cozy. It's a cozy, historic downtown full of shops, restaurants, and stuff for you to explore. So come and stay for a minute, or come and stay for a lifetime.
Welcome to Aurora.
Aurora was platted in 1819 and was originally to be named Decatur. However, local resident, pioneer, and statesman Jesse Holman, who first settled in the area in 1811, he changed the name to Aurora. Just 10 miles down the Ohio River was the bustling town of Rising Sun, which Holman felt was competition for his new town. The name Aurora, which in Roman mythology, there's this goddess, Aurora, and she renews herself each morning, flying across the sky, announcing the arrival or rising of the sun. So his name was perfect, as Aurora precedes Rising Sun. Aurora Rules was born in 1927 in Havana, Cuba. In 1947, she made her way to Aurora, Indiana, and a year later, in 1948, married local plumbing contractor Ray Shuck. In 1976, the couple purchased a new red Cadillac Eldorado convertible. They loved the car and racked up over 100,000 miles on it over the years. Before Aurora Shuck passed away in 1989, her wish was to be buried with that Cadillac. Ray made sure that her wish came true. He purchased 14 burial plots at Riverview Cemetery, where a large hole was dug to accommodate the concrete vault, which measured 27 feet long, 12 feet wide, and 6 feet deep. A crane was needed to lower the Cadillac into the vault, and Aurora's casket was placed across the back seat. The concrete top that sealed the vault weighed 16 tons. Ray passed away in 2002, was cremated, and some of his ashes were placed in the grave with Aurora. Right across the Ohio River from Aurora is the village of Petersburg, Kentucky. Before the Civil War, Petersburg was home to the largest distillery in the state of Kentucky and one of the largest in the country. The two towns became close over the years, exchanging goods and services. In the late 1850s, with the Civil War on the horizon, the two towns signed a type of treaty called the Friendly Pact, where the two agreed that no matter how bad things got between the North and South, these towns would remain friends. As a matter of fact, the two towns formed committees that met weekly to deal solely in resolving any issues that might arise, which could hinder their close friendship. Looking north across State Route 56 from Lesko Park, you will see two large stone arch caverns. These are the remains of a large brewery complex that was built in the late 1800s by the Crescent Brewery. In 1873, Thomas and James Gapp, they started the Great Crescent Brewery Company in Aurora. The brewery was 6 stories tall and took up the entire corner of 5th and Market Streets, where they meet with State Route 56. Their lager was so popular that it was even exported to Germany. The caverns kept the barrels of beer cold until they were ready to be shipped. In 1891, an explosion and fire killed 2 employees at the plant. The brewery went through a couple of owners after the fire and was closed in 1911. The building sat vacant and was eventually demolished by 1930, leaving only the portion of the beer caverns we see today. In 1888, a company was drilling for gas along Hogan Creek near today's intersection of State Route 350 and U.S. Route 50. Instead of hitting gas, they tapped into a mineral spring similar to the ones in Dillsboro and Milan, Indiana. After the spring was discovered, a small wooden pavilion was built over the site for those who wanted to use the mineral water. Unfortunately, during the 1937 flood, the pavilion and the spring were both lost in the catastrophic event. In 1966, a new pavilion was built by the Aurora Chamber of Commerce and the Aurora Business and Professional Women's Club. It was repaired in 2013. The first steam fire engine for Aurora was purchased and donated by local businessman Thomas Gaff in 1876. The pumper was then named the Thomas Gaff, and it was used in many fires in the Aurora area, including the infamous Crescent Brewery fire in 1891. Interestingly, the Crescent Brewery was owned by Gaff, and the pumper set a world record for operating 72 hours straight in that particular fire. The pump was later sold to a junk dealer during a World War II scrap drive where it fetched just $50. The nameplate is now in the possession of the Aurora Fire Department. In 1885, a new Aaron's Fox steam fire engine was purchased by the city of Aurora for $3,000 from the O&M Railroad Company. The steam pumper was appropriately named Aurora. In 1962, the pumper was loaned to the Cincinnati Fire Museum, where it still resides in 2022. Conceived during the Great Depression of the 1930s by the Franklin D. Roosevelt administration, the Treasury section of painting and sculpture designed to embellish new federal buildings with murals and sculptures. It was established within the Procurement Division of the Department of the Treasury's Public Works branch in October of 1934 and was funded by 1% of each construction appropriation. Under the direction of the financier and the painter Edward Bruce, who was assisted by Edward Rowan and the critic Forbes Watson, the section commissioned works of art by contract after selecting the artists by means of local and national competitions. At a cost of $2,571,267, it sponsored more than 1,100 murals and 300 sculptures, which were placed in the Justice, Post Office, Interior, and Social Security buildings in Washington, D.C., and in post offices and courthouses throughout the country. The Aurora Post Office, built in 1935, features a mural by Henrique Martin Mayer, an artist from Indianapolis. The mural, titled Down to the Ferry, is an oil painting that was cemented to the lobby wall on May 28, 1938. The mural features the Aurora skyline, including the old South Side School, the steeples of the Fifth Street Church, the Presbyterian Church, and St. Mary's Church viewed from the Kentucky side of the river. In the forefront are farmers with livestock and other travelers waiting for the ferry boat to transport them across the river to Aurora. Alexander Pattison of Aurora, Indiana, enlisted in the Union Army in 1861 during the Civil War at the age of 26. Pattison worked his way up through the ranks, eventually making captain on April 30th, 1862. During the Battle of Gettysburg, July 1st to the 3rd, 1863, at Culp's Hill, Pattison had shielded himself behind a large stone during the battle. 3 musket bullet marks on one side of the stone are evidence of how close the battle raged to his location. After the war, the large rough stone was secured by Captain Pattison from Culp's Hill on the Gettysburg battlefield and was transported to Aurora and was placed near his future gravestone in Riverview Cemetery as a monument to his memory. Pattison passed away on August 16, 1906, and is buried next to the stone that saved his life during the war. From the late 1800s to the early 1900s, bricks made from the heavy clay along the North Hogan Creek in Aurora were in demand. Several companies operated on the north side of Aurora, including the Walker Brick Company, who in 1884 produced bricks that mainly ended up being used for new house construction in the Cincinnati neighborhood of Price Hill. In the early 1900s, the Aurora-based American Brick Works was producing 2 million bricks a year along Hogan Creek and still couldn't keep up with demand. The Mitchell and Langtree Brickyard along the Ohio River produced over 1 million bricks a year in the late 1860s. However, no molding machinery was used at the brickyard as the managers thought handmade brick was superior. Aurora's first subdivision is the borough of West Side. Sitting on high ground in a loop of North Hogan Creek, when entering the neighborhood, you are greeted by beautiful homes built in the mid-1800s. The newer section of the subdivision sits on top of a former brick plant, and most residents will find discarded bricks in their yards if they dig just a few feet beneath the surface. The first telephone in Aurora was installed in 1869 in the Aurora Distilling Company office of Thomas Gaff. It only connected to one other phone, and that was H.W. Smith in Cincinnati, Ohio. Smith was the secretary and treasurer of the Aurora Distilling Company, and Gaff felt the need to be in close contact with his employee. The First National Bank of Aurora began operation in 1864 with $100,000 worth of working capital. The original bank building stood on 2nd Street but was replaced with the current structure in 1928. The First National Bank of Aurora issued paper currency in the amounts of $1, $2, $5, $10, $20, $50, and $100 banknotes. Each of the $10 notes, like this one here, were hand-signed by the president and cashier of the bank. Aurora still has its original jailhouse from 1887, although it hasn't been used since the 1980s. The contract to build the jail included a stipulation that it must be escape-proof. On the back side of the building in the police parking lot, you can still see the granite foundation. There are 3 6-inch wide slits in the granite walls, large enough to let in light, but small enough to keep anyone from escaping. Each granite block is held in place by steel rods drilled into each block. Note, this makes access to saws and chisels a little harder. The front door is solid steel with hinges concealed in the granite blocks. A second door of flat steel webbing locks through the front door can be locked from the outside. 6 cells, each with a steel fabricated door, can be locked with 2 massive iron padlocks. These doors open into the corridor of the jail, not outside. The ceiling and floors are made of heavy fabricated steel and concrete. A few of the steel cots are still in the cells. Located at the Aurora City Park is a beautiful octagonal barn thought to have been built in 1879. If so, this would be Indiana's oldest round barn. An investigation of the barn's nails indicates that the nails date from the early 1800s to 1890. Oliver P. Cobb was president of the Aurora Iron and Nail Company and had patents dating from 1876. The first known City of Aurora local, article discussing the merits of an octagonal barn appeared on page 4 in the June 19th, 1879 issue of the Aurora Dearborn Independent. Therefore, it is thought that the barn was indeed built in 1879. At the corner of Main and 3rd Streets in downtown Aurora is the local bicycle shop called Weber Sports. Walk inside, and in the back room, you'll find Indiana's best bicycle museum with over 130 vintage bicycles from the 1870 Bone Shaker to a 1997 Harley Davidson. The collection includes an 1896 tandem bike, which steers from the pilot and stoker positions, an 1899 Columbia Pope chainless with a shaft drive, Schwinn's from 1946 to the 1970s, a Donald Duck bike, a Hopalong Cassidy bike, plus tricycles and velocipedes. The First and Last Chance Saloon still stands on State Route 56, but is now vacant. State Route 56 was originally known as Decatur Street, and this was known as the Peters Building. The right side of the building was Peters Provisions Grocery Store. On the left side of the building was the First and Last Chance Saloon, so named, as this was your first or last chance to get a drink when leaving or entering Aurora. Frederick and Ida Mae Peters lived on the 2nd floor, and on the 3rd floor was a large dance floor with a raised platform for the band. Watching another episode of History in Your Own Backyard. Hope you enjoyed your time with us here today in Aurora, Indiana. Learned a couple of things that you hadn't heard of before. Remember, travel slowly and stop often. Bye for now.